Now, the first chapter, I thought, man, coming up, trying to find out about sex and about women. You read a lot, Cosmo and all these guys, but I honestly have to say the information that you provide as a foundation for understanding sex, understanding women I've never heard it before. So I kind of want to bring up some things here. You mentioned that fundamentally, the two sexes are the same, but they have small differences. But these differences make all the difference. And I thought that was information everybody needs to hear.
Yeah, we're the paradox is that we're very similar and we're very different. And the few ways in which we are different is huge. Because women are so complex and so profound and so other than us as men, and yet our humanity has commonality to it so that we can have a genuine basis of understanding. And what's fun is we get to discover each other in the process. I guess we can put the word fun in quotation marks because some of that discovery is painful, some of it is frustrating, and other adjectives such as that. But it certainly makes for an interesting life when you have other human beings that you can try to understand, discover, get a feel for, and that sort of thing. And in an intimate relationship, that gets magnified exponentially, so that this person that God has created that you are now with has layer upon layer upon layer of things that you can discover over time. And the more you discover is either the more you will like some things and more you will not like other things. But it certainly is interesting along the way to discover all of that.
Do you feel like that? Is it women are from Venus, men are from Mars? Is that how it goes?
Yeah, men are from Mars. Yeah.
Do you feel like that kind of mentality has kind of pushed us further apart than bringing us together? Because I feel like people aren't really taking time to acknowledge the similarities, like connect where the similarities lie. They're more focused on, he's like this, he's just a guy, or she's like this, she's just a woman, and it creates this kind of blockage between the male and the female.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. In the last, I would say, 20 years, especially with the advent of media blowing up, the differences between men and women have been focused upon to such a great extent that we have shifted our focus from what was before to now what the differences are. Part of that is the emancipation of women from the patriarchal controls that were in place in society for centuries and millennia, because it's not really until the mid to late 20th century that women really started gaining some of the freedoms that have been denied them since the beginning of time. So in order to set things straight, you have to come apart a little bit at first. And once you reach the edges of the differences, you have to then stop and say, okay, there's conflict between the sexes. Now let's see if we cannot reconcile some of the differences in such a way that it's mutually beneficial. But you're absolutely right in saying that we have focused on a lot of the differences, and to some extent we have started making fun of the differences.
Yeah.
In some ways that, sure, it's funny, but it also, in that general mindset, makes things more difficult as far as men really getting to know who women are and women getting to know who men are.
Following that up, you go on in the book to mention about when God created man. I thought it was quite, it was inspired the way that you broke down the fact that, Adam was formed from the dirt, but then Eve came after, and she was taken from one of his ribs. And you go to expand on that, saying that, to just, I guess, basically break down that layers that women have and the reason why men are so attracted to them, what entices us to them. I want to just go ahead and just kind of expand on that or break that down a little bit.
Okay. Women are wonderful. They are wonderful. And the first clues we see of that is, of course, in Genesis, where when God begins the process of the shift toward creating human beings and away from other things such as plants and animal and other life forms, he spends some time in the building process. So once he comes up with the man, the Bible seems rather straightforward in its depiction of how the man was created, you know, and the Lord God formed man out of the dust of the ground, breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. Bam. One time, man is created. And then when you get to the part about a woman being created, there's this, okay, Adam has brought animals and he's supposed to name them, and in the process of naming them, he's supposed to recognize the fact that, yay, all of these animals that I just named have their companion, so where's my companion? So he's supposed to gain the sense of his own loneliness or aloneness in the world. And once he gains that knowledge, then God says, okay, you can almost see it in your mind's eye where God does a thing like, all right, Adam, what would your companion look like if you were to envision it? And as he's about to give his description, God says, all right, you know what, hold the phone for a second. I'll get right back to you. Puts him to sleep. Unbeknownst to him, he's being operated on. And rather than take Eve from separate stock like Adam was taken from, which is dirt, she takes him from Adam. And then goes through this elaborate building process where once he's finished and he wakes Adam back up, he brings this woman into his life, and his reaction is profound. Okay, so let's stop there for a second. What do we see in the creation of man and woman that makes it so that we get an idea that women are a little bit different from men? Well, when we examine the words that the author uses in the description of the story, we find that the Hebrew word yatsar, which means formed, and God formed man out of the dust of the ground, is a fairly basic word. It just basically means what it says. He formed him, he gave him shape, and he gave him, you know, it's sort of like you put together a frame of something.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the creation of the woman, it uses a different word, which means to build. And when you really examine the contradistinction between the two words, you say, okay, man was formed, but woman was built. What is that really trying to tell us? And when we look at women and we see how complex they are, and how interestingly so they are complex, we have to say, maybe God was trying to communicate something in that story to us, that a woman is made so complex that she is really to be discovered. And the task of the man is to discover who this new person is. She wasn't just created at the same time as he was, like the other animals were. She was brought into his life, which is the way it actually happens in real life. We are brought into each other's lives, and then we have to discover who each other are. And that journey that takes place is either very fruitful and very enjoyable, or somewhere along the line it goes off the rails. And you know.
So there may be a lot of men that are in relationships with, you know, for how many years tired of their women, but they've yet to realize that there's a whole gold mine of things that they haven't yet to discover about that woman. Potentially might be everything that they think that they don't have is right there.
Right there, yeah.
They just need to find a way to uncover that.
And it's often that way, just as you described. You know, it's right there in front of your eyes, but you don't yet see it.
So in keeping with the creation story, like staying right there, what I found when I was in my university courses and I was, you know, observing and listening to a lot of people is like, I've heard a lot of people mention that they feel like the Bible is sexist, right? This comes when you look at the wording, I guess, of certain of the translations, some of the translations of the Bible, looking at it without understanding how it was written originally and looking at it through a modern day context, maybe there's a misinterpretation, especially with the part where you mentioned about helpmate and helpmeet, like the role of the woman. Can you expand on the difference and provide some clarity for our viewers?
Yeah, I don't know if the Bible is sexist from the modern understanding of the word. It can be argued that it is. Ancient tradition, ancient culture is certainly patriarchal. Men are the ones who rule. In a lot of cases, there are very few civilizations in ancient times in which women are the top rung of the ladder. There certainly are some, but they're few and far between. So for the most part, the Bible is written in the cultural milieu of its times. So it reflects a more patriarchal basis. Within that framework, what starts to emerge is as people relate to one another, you start seeing that there is some inequality. It's glaring in some cases. You know, when a man dies, his son inherits his property, and if he dies without sons, in a lot of cases, the woman can't inherit property, so she ends up being destitute. There is one example that I cite in the book in which a man by the name of Zelophehad died. He had, I think, 3 daughters, and the individuals came and said to Moses, these 3 women are trying to inherit the property of their father, and in our cultural tradition it's not so. So Moses sought the counsel of the Lord, and the Lord said, you know, daughters of Zelophehad are speaking what is right. If a man dies without any sons, then you shall permit his daughters to inherit his property. But the fact that it had to come to that really speaks volumes as to the nature of the society, because it is biased against women. So those who see those kinds of things and make the observation that the Bible is sexist, you know, we do have to listen to them. We don't have to always feel like we need to defend against people saying something bad about the Bible. If God was worried about his image, he wouldn't have put some of the stuff in the Bible that he did.
That's true.
But the fact that he put some of the stuff in there means he's going to be responsible for the way people perceive him. So if people are going to perceive him negatively because some of the stuff's in there, then that's on God. It's not. I can't afford to worry about that, because I can't put enough effort into changing other people's perception of who God is, because, you know, it's God's fault. God, you shouldn't have put that thing in there. Like, help me out here. You know, if you really want your image to be different, then take some of that stuff out. Don't put it in there. You're making life difficult for me. So, you know, I'll just leave it alone and let God deal with it.
That's true. I remember hearing a poet one time say that, you know, you don't need to defend God. It's like standing in front of a lion. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you step out the way, he can handle himself.
Yeah,
you know
that's
what I mean?
right.
Yeah.
Do you believe that most of the raw emotion and context in the Bible is lost in translation? Like with the example that you give of when Adam saw Eve, like the type of emotion that he felt when you read the original version of the Bible, it's more of a, you know, complete excitement. Like, look, she's a wonder, she's beautiful. But when you read it or you hear it in church, it's kind of like, and you saw this woman and he took her as his wife and moving along.
Yeah. When you go from one language to another, it's easy to lose the effect and the meaning, and it's particularly so in the case of, in a lot of cases in the Bible, in the particular one that you just referenced, where Adam meets Eve for the first time. I mean, you have to, unfortunately, know Hebrew to really understand the extent to which Adam lost his mind when he sees this beautiful naked woman for the first time. And it's as though he's just running around and saying, yo. But when you translate that into English, because English doesn't translate, you know, language can only translate so much. And part of what Adam's doing in the Hebrew text of the scripture involves both words and sound. And that might sound strange to say, because when you say words, they're supposed to make sound. But there are some words in Hebrew that they don't translate into an actual word in English. It translates more into activity and sound. So, for example, what Adam says is, therefore shall a man leave his father and mother, and he shall cleave to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. We've probably heard that a million times.